The hall was filled with small sounds of people waiting, chairs sliding, quiet coughs, and voices whispering. And in the middle of all that noise, a girl walked in slowly, her steps soft like she was scared to disturb anyone. She looked young, maybe still in her late teens, maybe a bit older. But what was clear was that she carried herself like someone who didn't want to be seen too much. Her shoulders pulled in and her eyes mostly on the floor. She wore a simple dress, nothing flashy, the kind of dress someone would pick when they don't want to look messy but also don't want to look like they're trying too hard. It was her first time playing in a hall like this, a real performance, not just a school event or a small family gathering. And the weight of that moment sat heavily on her chest, like a hand pressing down. The piano on stage looked bigger than she remembered, its black surface shiny under the bright lights, the keys waiting for her touch, waiting to see if she was ready. She could feel her heart in her throat, beating fast, and her hands were shaking just a little, the way hands shake when someone is cold or nervous or both. She told herself to breathe, inhale, exhale, but even breathing felt like something she had to remind herself to do, like her body had forgotten how because her mind was so full of fear. The host called her name, and for a moment she almost didn't stand up, thinking maybe she misheard, maybe someone else had a similar name and that person would go on stage instead. But when no one else moved, she knew it was her, and she forced her legs to push her forward, one step and then another, until she reached the center of the stage. The lights were brighter than she expected. They made it hard to see anything clearly, like the audience was just one giant shadow with hundreds of eyes. She could hear some people murmuring, not in a cruel way, not in a supportive way either, just the natural sound of strangers trying to guess what kind of performance was coming. Some people probably came to watch someone else, maybe a friend or their own child, and she knew that. She knew most eyes were waiting to be impressed, but not necessarily by her. She sat down on the piano bench and adjusted it carefully, because comfort matters when you're about to play, even if comfort is hard to find when nerves are eating you from the inside. She placed her hands on her knees first, like she needed to take one more second to collect herself, one more second to remember why she was here. Learning piano was never easy for her. She was not someone who understood music instantly. She wasn't born with fingers that magically knew where to go. She had to practice slowly, note by note, hour by hour. While other kids played outside or watched shows, she sat by a piano, making the same mistake 10 times and then fixing it on the 11th. There were days when she wanted to quit, when her teacher looked disappointed or her parents wondered if she was aiming too high, and those memories all lived in her head like old echoes. But then there were moments that kept her going, moments where her fingers finally got a difficult part right, where the music felt like warm light moving through her, where she felt like maybe she did belong here after all. Now, all those moments were gathered inside her like tiny lanterns, and she needed their light more than ever, because the darkness of doubt was loud in her mind. She took a deep breath and opened her eyes, looking down at the piano keys, long and clean and waiting, and she wondered if they were as nervous as she was. A soft introduction was what she planned, a gentle melody to ease into the performance. But now she questioned everything, even the softness, even the melody, wondering if maybe she should have chosen something louder, something stronger, something that would grab attention straight away. But she shook those thoughts off, or at least tried to, because second-guessing herself wasn't going to help now. Not when she was already here, already sitting in front of the piano with no escape route. Her fingers finally touched the keys, but not pressing yet, just resting like a bird settling on a branch, light and careful. In the audience, a person in the third row started scrolling through their phone like they expected the performance to be boring, like they had already decided she wouldn't be worth watching. Someone else whispered to another, maybe talking about what they would have for dinner, maybe talking about her. She didn't know, she didn't want to know. Her ears felt hot, her cheeks too, embarrassment rising even though she hadn't even played a single note yet. And she wondered why embarrassment always shows up early, like an uninvited guest. She told herself in her mind, "It's okay, you're okay. You can do this," like a gentle repetition, like a mantra to keep her from falling apart. She could almost hear her first piano teacher's voice from years ago, saying, "Don't rush, feel the music before you play it." And she held on to that advice like it was a lifeline. So she closed her eyes for a brief moment, blocking out the lights, the audience, the phone screens, the whispers, everything, and in that darkness she imagined herself at home, practicing on her old piano by the window, where no one was judging, no one was watching, She imagined the soft sun touching the floor, the sound of birds outside, the clock ticking in the background, and suddenly the hall didn't feel so scary. Not completely, but just enough to breathe. When she opened her eyes again, her heartbeat was still fast, but now there was something else too. Something small but powerful. A spark of determination. Like a voice inside her saying, "Show them why you're here." The host stepped back, giving her the stage fully, and she nodded without meaning to, like a promise to herself and to the piano. She straightened her back. Not too stiff, just enough to show she wasn't giving up. Not today, not after everything she had gone through. She pressed the first key gently, and the sound was soft, so soft that some people leaned forward to hear it better. Her introduction was delicate, like a whisper made of music. A whisper floating in the air like a feather, fragile but still present. She knew some might think it was too soft, too quiet, too shy, but that was okay, because this was her way of beginning, her way of entering the world of sound. Every note came from a place deep inside her, from every late-night practice, from every tear she cried when she failed, from every moment she stood up again and tried once more. Her hands were still shaking a little, but the piano didn't mind. It accepted her fear and still gave her music in return, as if to say, "It's okay. Be scared. Just play." Not every audience member was paying attention yet, but some were. A few faces softened. A few eyes watched more carefully, like they sensed something under the quiet surface. She didn't need everyone to believe in her right away. She just needed a chance, a single chance to grow, note by note, moment by moment. And in that gentle beginning, in that soft introduction, she placed her first step toward something bigger, something she didn't know yet but hoped for, something like a future. She didn't roar yet, she didn't amaze yet, she didn't shock anyone yet, but she didn't need to, because sometimes the simplest start is all a person needs. A start that says, "This is me and I'm trying," and maybe trying was enough for now, enough to keep her fingers moving, enough to keep the music alive, enough to hold her heart together while she built her courage inside every sound. The performance had just begun, but already she was changing, not visibly, not loudly, but slowly, quietly, like a seed breaking open underground where no one can see. She didn't know if she would impress them later. She didn't know if the world outside this hall would remember her, but she hoped the music would carry her through, guide her step by step, key by key. In that moment, she wasn't the shy person who walked in. She wasn't the quiet shadow she thought she was. She was someone who dared, someone who tried, someone who showed up even when fear tried to stop her. And sometimes showing up is the beginning of greatness, even if it doesn't look like greatness yet. Even if it starts with nothing but a soft introduction and shaking hands. The hall seemed even larger now that the music had begun. Like the sound made the walls stretch wider and the ceiling rise higher, and she could almost feel the pressure in the air. Her soft introduction drifted through the room, gentle like raindrops on a window, but every second her mind whispered, "Is this enough? Is this enough?" And those questions sat heavy in her chest. A group of people near the back shifted in their seats, not because they disliked what they heard, but because they were unsure what to feel yet, wondering if the performance was just warming up or if this was all there was going to be. Someone near the front glanced at a program sheet and tilted their head, trying to remember if they had seen her name before, if she was someone known, someone recommended, or just someone who showed up hoping for a chance. She felt those stares even without looking, like tiny pins of doubt pressing into her skin, making her wonder if maybe her music was too soft, too slow, too delicate for a room full of expectations. Her fingers moved carefully, each key pressed like she was testing the ground before walking on it. And the sound came out like a secret being shared. Not a declaration, not a shout, just a quiet offering. She remembered advice from another musician she once overheard, someone saying, "You have to grab the audience by the heart from the very first note." And now that sentence replayed in her mind like a warning label. Was she grabbing hearts, or was she letting them slip away? She wondered, feeling her confidence wobble like a chair with one short leg. Her notes floated through the hall, but some people seemed distracted. A person in the balcony rubbed their eyes like they were tired. Another looked down at their watch like time was moving slowly, and a third took a sip of water like they were waiting for something more to happen. Even though no one said a word to her, Even though she couldn't hear their thoughts, she felt the energy of uncertainty in the room. Like a cloud that hadn't decided whether to rain or drift away, the girl tried to focus on the piano keys, on the rhythm she had practiced for months, but her mind kept slipping like feet on ice, sliding into memories of all the times she messed up, all the times she wished she had been better, faster, stronger, noisier. A person near the aisle leaned to their friend and whispered something quietly, and though she couldn't hear the words, her imagination filled in the blanks with every worst possibility. Maybe she's too nervous. Maybe she chose the wrong piece. Maybe she shouldn't be up there. Her throat tightened, like her own breath was trying to run away, and she almost missed a note, almost lost her rhythm. But she saved it at the last second, her heart pounding like a drum in her ears. She hated that her body betrayed her this way. How nerves made her hands cold and her back stiff, like every muscle was trying to protect her instead of help her. Soft music was supposed to be beautiful. She told herself, soft music can still carry power, soft music can still matter. But in this moment she couldn't feel the beauty, only the fear. She wished the audience could see her heart instead of her shaking fingers, wished they could hear the story behind every note. The years of practice, the moments of doubt, the quiet victories she collected like small treasures. Her music wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic yet, but it was honest, and she hoped honesty could be enough. Even if just for a moment, the melody moved into the next phrase, a small rise, a bit more confidence built into the composition, and she let her fingers lean into it, hoping the audience would lean in with her. Some did, she could sense it. A few heads tilted, a few shoulders relaxed, as if they realized there might be more here than they first assumed, like a small surprise waiting inside the quiet. But doubt is a stubborn thing, and it clung to her like a shadow, making her question every second, asking her why she was here, why she thought she deserved to sit at this piano in front of all these people. She remembered the day she signed up for this performance, her hand shaking slightly as she wrote her name, thinking it was a dream, thinking maybe no one would even read her form. But then she got accepted, and when she did, she felt a rush of joy so strong it almost scared her. That joy felt far away now, like a memory from another lifetime, replaced by the tension sitting under her ribs like a stone. The soft notes felt like they were dissolving before they reached the audience, like they evaporated in the air, too light to land anywhere. She wanted to disappear for a second, just long enough to gather herself, like a bird hiding in branches before taking flight. But she couldn't. She was already here, and the music wouldn't pause for her fear. Her foot hovered above the pedal like she couldn't decide whether to press down, to let the notes stretch and breathe, or keep them short and safe. In that moment she almost wished the piano could speak for her, say something like, "She's trying her best," or "Give her a chance," or "Wait, just wait, something is coming." But pianos don't talk, they only echo what the player puts into them, and she wasn't sure if she was putting in fear or hope anymore. A gentle chord echoed through the hall, and even though she expected the audience to stay quiet, she thought she heard someone sigh softly, not in boredom but in something else, something like sympathy or connection, and that sound anchored her for a second. She realized that not everyone needed loudness to feel something, not everyone needed fireworks to pay attention. Some hearts listened in quiet spaces too, but even with that thought, the doubt didn't vanish, it just stepped back a little, like it was watching her from the doorway instead of sitting on her shoulders. Every second felt like a test, every note like a question she wasn't sure she could answer. But she kept going, kept playing, because stopping wasn't an option, not here, not now. She wondered if anyone else in this room had ever felt like this, like standing in front of something they dreamed about and suddenly feeling like maybe the dream wasn't built for them. Maybe someone in the audience knew that feeling, maybe more than she realized. Maybe there were people sitting there with their own shaking hands hidden in their pockets, their own quiet hopes tucked under their tongues, afraid to speak them aloud. She wished she could talk to them, tell them she understood, tell them that just being here was hard and brave and messy. But music was the only voice she had right now, so she tried to speak through it. As she moved into the next section of the piece, the music dipped into a lower tone, the notes deep and heavy like the weight she carried inside, and somehow playing those notes felt like letting something out, like opening a window in a room that had been closed for too long. The audience didn't know her story. They didn't know about the nights she cried after practice, the afternoons she felt like a failure, the mornings she forced herself to try again even when her heart felt hollow. They didn't know how many times she had wanted to quit, how many times she thought her dream was too big for someone like her, too high to reach, too heavy to lift. But her music knew, the piano knew, the keys had felt every version of her. The scared one, the hopeful one, the frustrated one, and now they held her gently, like an old friend trying to guide her forward. A soft ripple of notes filled the air, fragile but determined, and she followed them like footsteps in the snow, trusting them even though she still felt lost. The hall wasn't completely silent anymore. It was listening, not fully, not unanimously, but enough to matter, enough to give her a thread of courage to hold on to. She still doubted herself. She still worried she wasn't good enough, but she kept moving, kept playing, because sometimes courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet and shaking and still choosing to go on. She knew the music would change soon. She knew a shift was coming, a moment where she would have to decide whether to hold back or let go, whether to stay small or rise. And maybe the audience didn't know it yet. Maybe they still expected her to remain in this soft, uncertain space, but she felt something building inside her. Something that wasn't just fear anymore. Something that felt like a spark. The doubt was still there, but she could feel her determination growing next to it, like two sides of the same coin. And she knew the moment would come when she would have to choose which voice to follow. For now, she let the music guide her. Let each key be a step forward. Let each note be a reminder that she was still here, still trying, still alive in the music even if she felt invisible in the room. Sometimes the beginning of a performance isn't where greatness happens. Sometimes it's messy and shaky and small. But beginnings matter because they lead to everything else. And she was beginning, even if doubt walked beside her. Even if her soft notes felt like whispers in the face of the world. She was beginning, and beginnings are never failures. She didn't know what would happen next, didn't know if the audience would stay with her or drift away. But she held onto the music like a lifeline, trusting that something inside her knew the way forward even if she didn't feel it yet. The soft introduction was ending soon. The next steps waiting like a door half open, and she breathed in, breathed out, preparing herself for whatever would come. The next part of the song would ask more from her. Ask for strength she wasn't sure she had. Ask for volume, for boldness, for something like a roar growing in the center of her chest. But before that roar could rise, she had to survive this part. The part filled with doubt and quiet and questions. The part where she didn't feel like a star but just a person trying. And somehow, accepting that made her feel a little braver, like it was okay not to be perfect yet. Okay not to shine yet. Okay to simply be imperfect and human and trying. So she kept playing, note by note, breath by breath, through doubt and fear and fragile hope. Because even though she didn't feel ready, she knew she couldn't turn back. And maybe that was enough for now. Maybe the act of continuing was the first real victory. Even if no one clapped for it, even if no one noticed it, even if the room stayed half distracted, half engaged. Because sometimes the most important moments happen inside a person, not on the outside. And in this moment, something was happening inside her, something like a shift, something like a quiet decision to keep going no matter what. The soft part of the music faded gently, like a curtain lowering, but she could feel the next act gathering behind it, reaching for her, calling her towards something bigger. She didn't know if she could rise to it, but she knew she would try, and maybe trying was the closest thing to courage she had. Either way, the music was waiting, and she leaned into it, as the next note, deeper and stronger, began to form beneath her trembling fingertips. The soft part of the song faded like a memory, and in the tiny space before the next section began, she felt something unusual inside her, like a door unlocking. Her heartbeat was still racing, her fingers still slightly cold, but her spine straightened on its own, as if her body remembered something her mind had forgotten, something like the feeling of belonging. For the first time since stepping on stage, she didn't feel like she was running from her fear. She felt like she was turning toward it, facing it head-on, breathing in its presence without collapsing. The audience didn't know what was happening. They couldn't see the shift happening inside her ribcage, the quiet change that felt like a tide turning. But she felt it like electricity humming under her skin. She squared her shoulders, not to look confident, not to impress anyone, but because it felt natural, like finally standing the way she was always meant to stand. Her hands hovered over the piano keys again. But this time they didn't tremble quite as much. The shaking was still there like an echo, but not loud enough to guide her anymore. She remembered all the times she sat alone in a quiet room practicing this exact section. The part where the music stopped whispering and began to speak, where the melody shifted from shy to certain, from soft to bold. Her teacher used to say, "This is where you stop apologizing for your sound." And those words floated back to her now, like a warm hand resting between her shoulder blades, steadying her. She inhaled slowly, the way she was taught, through her nose, not rushed, not shallow, a breath that reached deep into her lungs and anchored her to this moment, to this stage, to this choice to keep going. The piano keys glimmered under the lights, tiny reflections bouncing off the polished surface like stars, and she imagined each note as a step forward, a step out of fear and into something stronger. With her next exhale, she pressed down harder than before, and the sound that came out was different, fuller, like a voice clearing its throat after years of silence. It wasn't loud yet, but it carried weight, it carried intention, it carried something like the beginning of belief, not full confidence, not yet, but the first small spark of it. Someone in the audience leaned forward, maybe without realizing it, the change in her sound pulling their attention like a magnet. Her fingers moved with more certainty now, not rushing, not forcing, but trusting the music in a way she hadn't allowed herself to trust moments ago. She wasn't thinking about mistakes anymore, or at least not as loudly. The fear of failing was still there, but it felt smaller, like a voice being drowned out by something bigger. She felt her back lengthen, her shoulders open, her arms relax just enough to move freely, and the shift in her posture changed the music too, like the piano responded to her courage with a fuller voice of its own. Her eyes opened wider, not to look at the audience, but to see the keys clearly, to see the path her hands were taking. And in that clarity she felt something close to joy, a quiet joy, fragile but real, like the first sunlight after a week of clouds, gentle but enough to remind her why she was here, why she chose music in the first place. The hall was still, not silent, but still, a calmness settling over the room like dust catching the beams of light, a quiet invitation that she could fill with sound if she chose. She lifted her hands slightly off the keys, only for a heartbeat, creating a pause that wasn't an accident, wasn't hesitation, but a choice, a moment, to say something without words. Then the music resumed, stronger this time, her hands moving with purpose, each note flowing into the next like water following a current. The melody climbed, not fast, not dramatically, but like a story building, like a person finding their voice in the middle of a sentence. Her legs felt steadier, her breathing more natural, her shoulders grounded instead of tense, and the piano responded like a friend learning to trust her again. She remembered a night months ago when she sat at home practicing the same section, her eyes blurry from tiredness, the lamp flickering because the bulb needed changing, and she played the same notes over and over until she cried, not because she was sad, but because she wanted the music to feel like it belonged to her and not to someone better. That night she whispered to the piano, "Maybe one day this will make sense." And now, here on stage, under these bright lights and restless eyes, it felt like it finally did. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not in a way that looked impressive to everyone, but in a way that felt honest, and that honesty felt like a strength she didn't know she had. Someone coughed in the audience, a sharp sound that cut through the melody for a second, and she almost flinched, almost lost herself again. But this time she didn't. She kept going, her hands steady, her focus unbroken. That tiny victory felt like a mountain moved, like a door closed on the voice that once told her she wasn't enough. The tempo grew, her fingers moving faster now, not rushed, but with rhythm, with energy, like she was catching up to herself after years of holding back. Her body leaned slightly into the music, her wrists soft and flexible, her elbows lifting at just the right places, her movements no longer small and afraid but fluid, connected, like she was part of the instrument instead of separate from it. Her posture had changed, and with it, her belief, her identity inside this moment. She wasn't a small shadow on a big stage anymore. She was a player, a musician, a person who had something to say. The audience wasn't cheering, they weren't gasping, there was no dramatic reaction. But she didn't need that. The fact that they were listening was enough. A person adjusting their seat quietly, another placing their phone face down, a couple of eyes watching her more carefully now. These little signs were enough to show her she hadn't lost them. Not everyone, not completely, and maybe for the first time, she realized she didn't need to win the whole room all at once. She just needed to reach someone, even one person, even herself. The notes she played now carried pieces of her story. Every doubt, every late-night practice, every moment she wanted to quit but didn't, all woven into a sound that was becoming more than music. It was becoming proof. Proof that she was still here, still fighting, still building herself note by note, breath by breath. Her posture shifted again. A little taller, a little freer, her chin lifting, her shoulders settling into place like they found where they belonged. She didn't know it, but from the audience she looked different now, not because of her clothes or her face or the lights, but because she carried herself like a person who believed in something, even if that belief was still small, still growing. A person in the front row smiled slightly, maybe without realizing it, like they recognized the feeling of someone finding their strength. She kept playing, the melody swelling, the quieter parts fading into the background of her memory, replaced by something fuller, something like a voice that wasn't afraid to be heard anymore. For a moment, she forgot she was being watched, forgot about the stage, the lights, the pressure, and just felt the movement of her fingers, the vibration of the strings inside the piano, the way the air carried the music like a thread connecting her to everyone in the room. It felt like freedom, the kind that doesn't roar or scream, but expands silently from the inside, a freedom that says, I am here, and I am trying, and that is enough. She played the final measure of this section with clarity, the last note hanging in the air like a held breath, like a promise. She didn't know if the audience could hear the change in her, but she could. She felt it like a heartbeat she finally recognized as her own, steady and real. She lifted her hands from the keys, only for a second, preparing for what came next, the harder part, the louder part, the part that would ask for everything she had. Her posture stayed strong, her chin steady, her breath even, and for the first time, she wasn't dreading the next section. She was ready for it, not fearless, not perfect, not suddenly transformed into someone who never doubted, but ready in a way she had never been before, because something had shifted, something had opened, and now the music wasn't just a performance, it was a chance to show the world and herself what she had carried all this time in silence. And as she leaned forward to begin the next part, she knew that whatever happened, whether the audience loved her or forgot her, she was no longer the girl who walked in afraid. She was someone who chose to stay, someone who chose to play, someone who chose to rise, and that choice felt like the beginning of everything. The room felt different now, like the air itself had leaned in to hear what would happen next, and she felt it in her bones, that quiet tension before a storm finds its voice. She placed her fingers on the keys again, but this time it didn't feel like she was asking the piano for permission. It felt like she was greeting an old friend she finally recognized. Her heart pounded, not from fear this time, but from possibility, a rushing feeling like wind inside her chest. And for a moment she wondered if this was what courage felt like. Not loud, not perfect, but alive. When the next section began, the first notes came out sharper, brighter, like sparks flying when metal hit stone, the sound ringing through the hall with a strength she didn't know she had. It wasn't just louder, it was clearer, like every note carried direction and purpose, like her music had grown a spine and was standing tall beside her. The sudden shift caught some of the audience off guard, their heads lifting, eyes widening, like a ripple moving through a still lake when something breaks the surface. This wasn't the shy introduction anymore. This wasn't the quiet whisper of someone afraid to take up space. This was something else, something like truth waking up, something like confidence being born in real time. Her fingers moved faster, not with panic, but with energy, like they were chasing something she had always wanted but was too afraid to reach for. And now it was finally within reach. There were moments in her practice when she imagined this part sounding like thunder, not the angry kind, but the kind that makes you stop and listen, the kind that shakes the air without breaking anything. And now it was happening. She leaned into the music, her shoulders dropping lower, her arms moving with the motion of her hands, every inch of her body connected to the sound she was creating. She felt like she was no longer just playing the piano. She was speaking through it, every chord like a sentence, every change in tempo like an emotion she didn't know how to say out loud. The piano roared, not in a wild or uncontrolled way, but like a voice that had been quiet too long and finally found a reason to be heard. Firm, steady, full. A few people in the audience straightened up, their attention sharp now, as if they realized they had almost underestimated someone they shouldn't have. This shift wasn't about proving anything to them, though not really. It was about proving something to herself, proving she wasn't just someone who dreamed. She was someone who acted, someone who tried, someone who showed up. The fear that had been sitting on her shoulders earlier felt like it was melting away, dripping into the keys, transforming into sound, into something new, like a version of herself she had never met before. The left hand pounded a steady rhythm, bold and grounded, while the right hand lifted into the melody like a bird taking flight, the contrast creating a balance that felt like the world opening up in front of her. She could feel the music vibrating through the floor, through the bench, through her chest, like it was a heartbeat shared between her and the piano, and each note stitched them closer together. Someone in the back row whispered, this time not in doubt, but in surprise, maybe even admiration, the soft wow barely audible but somehow reaching her, like a gift sent across the room. She didn't react to it, didn't smile, didn't look around. She didn't want to lose her focus, but inside her chest, something warm bloomed, like sunlight touching snow, melting the last of the cold fear she had carried. The music swelled again, climbing into higher registers, the melody curling through the air like smoke, twisting and rising, until it reached the ceiling and filled the corners of the hall. Her hair fell a little out of place, a few strands resting against her cheek, but she didn't bother to fix it, her hands too busy, her mind too anchored in the music to care about anything else. There is a rare kind of moment in life where a person feels completely present, not stuck in the past or worried about the future, and that moment found her now like a wave lifting her, not drowning her, but carrying her. She wasn't thinking about whether she would mess up or whether the audience liked her. She was just thinking about sound, about movement, about the feeling of being so alive she could almost taste it. Her elbow lifted slightly as her wrist made a quick turn, her fingers dancing across the keys in a flourish she never thought she could pull off without stumbling. But here she was, doing it like her hands had always known how. The hall felt smaller now, not in a suffocating way, but in an intimate way, like a conversation between her and the room, like the walls leaned closer not to close her in, but to hear her better. And she didn't whisper anymore. Her music spoke clearly, confidently, telling the story of every hour she practiced alone, every time she felt invisible, every moment she stayed even when quitting felt easier. The sound grew, a swell of chords filling the space, and she could feel the power in it, real power, not aggressive, but strong like ocean waves, strong like mountains, strong like something that had taken years to build. Every note felt like she was chiseling away at the version of herself who didn't believe she could do this, sculpting something new, something stronger, something that looked a little like hope. She remembered being younger, sitting at a piano much smaller than this, pressing the keys and wondering why they felt so heavy sometimes, why music felt like climbing uphill on the hardest days. And now she felt like she had reached a viewpoint where the world looked different, wider, open. The piano roared again, the sound loud enough to vibrate the air, but still controlled, still intentional, like a voice raised not in anger but in passion, in certainty, in a deep belief that what she was saying mattered. For the first time, she didn't just feel like someone playing a song. She felt like someone claiming her space, not apologizing for her sound, not shrinking, not hiding, but blooming. Her hands moved with purpose, striking the keys with strength, not harshness, each note clear and ringing like bells. And she felt the energy surge up her arms and into her chest like a pulse. If someone tried to speak now, their voice would be swallowed by the music, not in a cruel way, but in a way that said the room belonged to the sound in this moment, and she was the one making it happen. Her posture stayed upright, her chin lifted, a steadiness in her neck and shoulders that wasn't there before, and that physical shift made everything else feel possible. Like she could lift worlds with her hands if she needed to, like she could change something in herself with nothing but sound and intention. The melody spiraled downward now, not weaker, but deeper, like roots digging into soil, finding stability. finding a place to grow from, and she followed it, letting the rhythm ground her, steady her, teach her. The music softened for a heartbeat, a tiny breath in the middle of a storm, and then rose again with force, a controlled explosion of sound that filled the space and left no room for doubt. Someone clapped quietly before catching themselves, realizing the piece wasn't over. But the reaction didn't annoy her. It fueled her. Like confirmation that she had reached someone, even without words. The roar of the piano wasn't just the volume, it was the clarity, the direction, the feeling that every note had a place and a reason. And she knew exactly why she chose each one. Even if she couldn't explain it out loud, this wasn't just a performance anymore. It was a conversation between her heart and the world, and the piano was translating for her, turning her emotions into something that could be heard, something that could be felt. The sound wrapped around the audience like a thread, connecting them, binding them, even if they didn't realize it, even if they would forget it later. Right now they were here with her in this moment. Her feet pressed the pedals with precision, not too long, not too short, the sustain giving the notes breath, the damper muting them just enough to control the swell, that balance making the piano sound almost like it was breathing with her. Her back muscles worked to keep her upright, her shoulders relaxed, her core strong, the physicality of the performance reminding her that music wasn't just mental. It lived in the body too, in every motion, every angle, every breath. The escalation of the piece continued like a climb, like a person scaling a mountain they once thought was impossible, and each measure felt like reaching a new ledge, a new height, a new view. The piano roared again, louder this time, stronger, and she didn't flinch. She matched its energy. Her hands surging forward with another wave of notes, the room vibrating with the sound. Her mind wasn't blank, but it wasn't filled with fear either. It was focused, sharp, present, aware only of what mattered, the music, the keys, the next note, the next breath. In this moment, she wasn't invisible. She wasn't small. She wasn't the shy girl who stepped onto the stage trying not to be seen. She was someone else entirely, someone she had always hoped she could be. With a final sweep of her right hand, the section came to a dramatic close, the last note ringing through the hall like a held breath, like a declaration, like a door being kicked open to whatever came next. She lifted her hands from the piano, letting the sound settle, letting the room absorb it, and for a moment the silence felt just as loud as the music had been. The piano keys still vibrated faintly under her fingertips, like they remembered her touch, like they were waiting for her next move. She didn't know what the audience was thinking. She didn't know what they saw when they looked at her now. But for the first time, she didn't need to know. She felt something new in her chest. Not pride exactly, not confidence in full bloom, but a beginning, a seed, a spark, something warm and growing and real. The piano had roared, and she had roared with it. Not in sound, but in presence, in belief, in the way she held herself like she belonged here, like she deserved to be heard. And maybe, just maybe, she did. The echo of the last powerful note was still fading when she began the next part. Her hands slowing down, returning to something more gentle, as if the music itself needed to catch its breath. The shift in sound felt like stepping from sunlight into shade, still warm, still alive, but calmer, softer, like a heartbeat settling after running. She let the melody open up like a long sigh, each note placed with care, not rushed, not pushed, just gently offered to the room like secrets she had never spoken aloud. This section of the piece wasn't loud, it wasn't meant to roar, it was meant to speak, and she knew that. She understood that now in a way she didn't before, not just in her mind but in her bones. Her fingers glided across the keys, playing a phrase she had practiced hundreds of times. But now it sounded different, older, wiser, as if the music had carried her through something and was now helping her tell the world what she found on the other side. Every note felt like a memory, some sweet like sunlight through curtains, some heavy like rain that wouldn't stop, each one layered into the melody like brushstrokes on a canvas. She remembered mornings before school, barely awake, practicing scales while the house was still quiet, her hands stiff from sleep but still moving, still learning, still trying. She remembered afternoons when she felt like she was improving, like the keys finally understood her, like the piano wasn't just wood and strings but a friend who always listened, who never judged. She remembered nights when she broke down, when her fingers wouldn't do what she told them to, when her teacher's corrections felt like arrows, not guidance, when frustration made her eyes blur and the keys looked like strangers again. The music carried those nights too, the quieter notes bending like tired shoulders, the pauses heavy like held-back tears. But in the sound there was always movement, forward, forward, forward. Even when it felt slow, even when it felt impossible. Her story was never just about talent. It was about staying when it hurt, coming back when she felt small, trying again when her confidence cracked like thin glass. And now, with every note, she was sharing all of that. Not directly, not with words, but with feeling, with sound, with the language her heart knew even when her voice didn't. Someone in the audience blinked slowly, their expression softening, like something in the music reminded them of themselves. Like they saw a piece of their own life reflected in this melody they had never heard before. That was the beautiful thing about music. She realized, it didn't have to match someone's story to touch them. It just had to feel true, and truth could feel familiar even when the details were different. Her left hand carried the steady harmony, a heartbeat under the melody, warm and sure, like footsteps on a familiar road, and her right hand floated above it, delicate and searching, like someone walking that road for the first time. The contrast felt like who she used to be and who she was becoming, side by side, learning how to exist together without fighting, without one drowning the other. For years she thought she had to erase the version of herself that was scared, the version that doubted, the version that trembled before performances and questioned every dream. But now she realized that version wasn't a mistake. It was the foundation, the beginning, the roots, and the version playing now, the one sitting on the stage, breathing through the music, holding the audience's attention in the palm of her hand without begging for it. That version was the flower, the growth, the proof that roots matter. The melody twisted upwards suddenly, like a question, a moment of uncertainty, and she leaned into it, letting the unease show, letting the vulnerability live in the notes instead of hiding it. She didn't have to pretend she was fearless. She didn't have to erase the struggle to earn beauty. The music taught her that. The music held space for both, and she was learning to do the same for herself. A man in the middle row sat forward, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on her hands like he was watching something sacred being built in real time. And maybe this moment was sacred in a human way, not holy but honest. She had always thought she needed to be extraordinary to be worth watching. But now she realized she just needed to be real. Real was enough. Real was powerful. Real could reach people in ways perfection never could. Her fingers slowed, descending into lower notes, the sound growing heavier, fuller, like a memory settling on the surface of water before sinking. She let the weight happen, didn't rush past it, didn't smooth it over because life wasn't always polished. Music didn't need to be either. The heaviness wasn't hopeless, it was human. It was the sound of someone who fell and stood up again. Someone who felt lost and kept searching. Someone who doubted and still tried. And when the melody rose again, lifting into something brighter, something that felt like morning after a long night, the contrast hit harder because the darkness had been acknowledged first. Not ignored, not denied, but honored as something that shaped her. The notes shimmered like light on water now. Small ripples of hope spreading outward, reaching the edges of the hall, touching people she would never meet again. People who would forget her name but remember this feeling. It was enough, she thought, it was enough to be remembered in feeling. Even if not in memory, even if not in name, even if not forever. Somewhere near the back, someone wiped their eye quickly, embarrassed to be emotional over a stranger. But they couldn't help it. The music found them anyway. She didn't know this was happening. She wasn't watching them. She had learned not to search the audience for approval anymore. But if she had seen it, maybe it would have made her chest glow the way music sometimes did. The melody reached a peak, a delicate one, not a loud triumph, but a quiet realization, like someone whispering, "I survived," instead of shouting it. Because surviving didn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it just felt like moving forward with shaking knees, and that was still enough. Her right hand danced over the higher keys, each note like a tiny star, bright and brief, and her left hand grounded them with deeper tones, like earth and sky meeting, like balance found after years of falling to one side or the other. There were mistakes in her life, lessons learned too late, moments wasted, chances missed, But the music didn't ask her to forget them. It asked her to use them, to shape them into sound, to make something from them instead of letting them rot inside her. So she did. She let the shame, the regret, the pain, the hope, the joy, the fear, the love, all of it flow into her hands, into the keys, into the air, into the audience, into existence. This was her story, told in pieces, told in emotions, told in melodies instead of paragraphs, and somehow it felt more complete this way. Like music allowed room for what words couldn't hold. The room felt different again, but not like before, not like the air was waiting, not like the audience was questioning. It felt like they were with her now, following the thread of her sound like a path. She didn't lead them with force. She didn't demand their attention. She simply offered her truth and let them choose to walk with her or not. And that was enough. The notes slowed again, nearing the end of the section, the story reaching a resting point. Not a conclusion, just a pause. The way life sometimes pauses without resolution, without answers, without closure. She held the last note longer than usual, her finger pressing the key gently but firmly, letting the sound hang, letting it breathe, letting it be. When she lifted her hand, the silence that followed was full, rich, like the air itself had absorbed the music and was humming with the aftertaste of it. She didn't rush into the next part. She allowed the silence to live, because silence wasn't emptiness now, it was part of the story too. A chapter without words, a page without ink. In that silence, she exhaled, her shoulders lowering, her body loosening like a knot untangling slowly, and she felt lighter. Not because the performance was over, it wasn't, not because she had changed the world, she hadn't, but because she had changed something inside herself, and that was enough to shift the ground beneath her feet. Every note had told her story. Not all of it, not perfectly, but honestly, and maybe honesty was all she ever needed to offer. She wasn't finished, not with the performance, not with growing, not with becoming, but she had crossed a line she never thought she could cross, and she felt it like a quiet victory, steady and warm. The piano waited for her next move. The audience waited too. But for the first time, she didn't feel rushed. She didn't feel unworthy. She didn't feel like an imposter in her own dream. She felt like someone who belonged, maybe not fully, maybe not forever, but in this moment, in this breath, in this heartbeat, she belonged. And she let that settle inside her like sunlight through glass, soft, gentle enough. The silence after her last note felt like a doorway, one she needed to step through on her own terms, and she sat there with her fingers hovering above the keys, breathing in slowly. The next section was waiting, the one she had feared the most during practice, the one she had gotten wrong more times than she could count. Each mistake echoing in her memory like footprints she tried to wipe away but couldn't. This was the final part of the piece, the flourish, the moment where everything that came before needed to come together. Not perfectly but truthfully, honestly, like the closing lines of a letter written straight from the heart. She lifted her hands, letting them float for a heartbeat above the keys, giving herself one moment to gather every lesson, every breath, every reason she had to be here. She thought of all the times she almost quit, the nights she stared at the piano like it was a stranger she didn't know how to talk to, the moments she wondered if dreams only belonged to people stronger than her, louder than her, braver than her. But then she remembered how the piano had changed, how it responded to her, how it listened when she played softly and roared when she finally found her courage, and she realized something she had never allowed herself to think before. She wasn't fighting the piano, she was working with it, and it was working with her like partners learning the same language at the same time, learning how to communicate through sound instead of words. So she lowered her hands slowly, and then she began, the first notes of the final section ringing out like bells, clear and bright. The pace was faster now, but she didn't rush. She let the energy build like water gathering speed in a river, gaining momentum not from force but from direction, from knowing where it was going. Her fingers moved in patterns she had practiced until her muscles knew them better than her mind, muscle memory guiding her like instinct, like breath. She could feel the change, the shift from storytelling to resolution, the music no longer asking questions but answering them. Not with certainty, not with perfection, but with acceptance. The flourishes climbed the keys like birds taking flight. Her right hand moving so quickly she almost couldn't see her own fingers, but she felt everything, felt every note like a spark beneath her skin. Each sound had weight, Not heavy like burden, but heavy like importance. Like each note mattered. Like each moment deserved to exist. The melody rose into the air and the hall held it carefully. Like cupped hands around a flame. Not to smother it. Not to steal its heat. But to protect it. To witness it. Someone in the audience leaned back and exhaled. Like they had been holding their breath with her. Like the story she had been telling through the music had become theirs too. She let her left hand take the lead for a measure, grounding the sound with deeper tones, the low notes humming through the floor and up into her feet, her legs, her spine, anchoring her to the bench, to the stage, to the moment. Her right hand returned with speed, running up the keys like a ribbon curling in the wind, looping around the room, tying everything together without needing to be asked, without asking for permission. This was the part that used to terrify her, the moment she feared would fall apart, the moment where the smallest mistake could break the illusion. But now, here, it didn't feel like a threat, felt like freedom, not loud, uncontrolled freedom, but the kind that feels like being seen for who you are and not shrinking away, the kind that feels like taking up space and not apologizing for it. She felt tears press behind her eyes, not from sadness, not from pain, but from the weight of everything, from the feeling of actually being here, from the realization that she had survived every moment that tried to stop her from reaching this one. But she didn't cry, not yet. She held the emotion in her throat, in her chest, in her fingertips, channeling it into the music, letting it guide the strength in her hands, the softness in her wrists, the care in her timing. This wasn't about proving anything anymore, not to the audience, not to her teacher, not to anyone who ever doubted her. The person she was proving something to was herself, and she was finally listening. Her pulse pounded with the rhythm, her mind clear like a window just cleaned, all the fog gone, all the doubt pushed aside not by force but by focus. She felt like she was both inside her body and floating above it, watching herself and being herself at the same time, a strange, beautiful duality that only happened when she lost herself in the music. The room blurred around the edges. Not because her vision faded, but because nothing else mattered, nothing else existed. Nothing but the piano, the notes, the air, the sound. She didn't question her hands now. She didn't question her place here. She didn't question whether the audience understood her. She just played, and the music soared. The melody reached the highest point, the final climb, the moment everything came together in a burst of sound that wasn't just noise. It was everything she had lived. Everything she had feared, everything she had fought for, translated into notes. Her fingers moved like they were chasing the sun, reaching, and then finally catching it, holding it, releasing it gently back into the room. The keys beneath her hands felt alive, humming with the echoes of every note she had played tonight, every version of herself she had been, every failure she carried that had somehow built the road to this moment. And when the final run of notes came, the flourish she had practiced until her hands went numb, she didn't hesitate, she didn't flinch, she didn't doubt, she just played. The notes shimmered like light off broken glass, sharp but beautiful, fragile but resilient. Every sound a reminder that broken things could still shine, could still matter, could still be seen. The run ended with a soft landing. Not a crash, not a bang, but a gentle touch, like the final stroke of a brush on a finished painting. The detail that completes the picture without demanding attention. She let the sound fade, her hands resting gently on the keys, her chest rising and falling with deep breaths that felt like the first real breaths she had taken all night. The hall was silent again, but it wasn't empty now. The silence felt full, like the air had been changed, like something had been added, not taken away. She lifted her hands from the keys, slowly, carefully, like letting go of something precious, something she wasn't ready to drop, something she might want to hold again. Her shoulders fell back into place, her posture still tall, her chin steady, and she looked at the keys with a softness she hadn't felt before, a tenderness she didn't know she was capable of giving to herself. This was her ending, not perfect, not flawless, but true, and that was enough. She sat still for a moment, the lights shining on her like sunlight through trees, not harsh, not blinding, just warm, illuminating her. She didn't know what the audience would do next. She didn't know what they thought. She didn't know if she reached them. But she reached herself, and that mattered in ways she never understood before. In her chest, her heartbeat slowed, settling into a steadier rhythm, like the music had repaired something inside her, stitched something up, opened something else. She placed her hands in her lap, and for the first time since she walked in, she didn't feel like she was hiding anything. She felt open, present, alive. The piece was over, but she was not. She was just getting started. For a moment that felt impossibly long. The hall was frozen in silence, the kind of silence that felt alive, like the entire room was holding a single breath together, unsure of what to do next. She sat at the piano with her hands still resting in her lap, her shoulders relaxed, her heartbeat settling, and she tried to understand what she had just done, what she had just lived through. Her eyes stayed on the keys, the same keys she had feared hours ago, the same keys she had doubted she deserved to touch, and now they looked different, not because they had changed, but because she had. She blinked, slowly, the stage lights blurring slightly, her mind still catching up to the present moment, still replaying the final notes of her performance in her head like an echo that didn't want to fade. And then, somewhere in the hall, someone clapped, just one person at first, a single pair of hands coming together with steady, certain rhythm, the sound sharp and clear in the quiet. It was enough. Another clap joined, and another, and then it was like the room remembered how to move, how to react, how to breathe, and applause spread like a wave through the audience, one row at a time, building, building, building. People who had been leaning back sat up straighter. People who had been distracted by programs or phones set them aside. People who had once looked uncertain now looked amazed, their expressions open, their eyes bright. The applause grew louder, filling the hall like the music had, rising like a tide that lifted the air, surrounding her in sound, not like noise, but like recognition, like appreciation, like connection. Some people stood up slowly at first, then more followed, like falling dominoes, like one person's courage to stand gave permission to the next and the next and the next, until a section of the audience was on their feet, clapping, cheering, smiling toward the stage. She didn't move yet. She didn't stand. She just sat there, watching this moment unfold, trying to understand that it was real, that all of this was for her, because of her, because she stayed when fear told her to leave. Her chest felt warm, like someone had lit a candle inside her, not a wild flame, but a steady one, a flame that could grow, a flame she could protect. The applause didn't fade, it didn't weaken, it stayed steady, strong, like the room wanted her to feel every second of it, wanted her to understand that they weren't clapping out of politeness, they were clapping out of respect, out of emotion, out of gratitude. Someone near the front let out a soft cheer, like they couldn't hold their excitement anymore, and it wasn't loud enough to break decorum, but it was enough to make her breath catch, because that small cheer held joy in it, held belief in it. She finally moved, lifting her hands from her lap, placing them gently on the edge of the bench to steady herself, and she stood, her legs a little shaky, like they remembered the fear she had felt, but were learning the courage she had grown. The audience reacted to her movement with an increase in applause, like her standing was a signal, a confirmation that she was ready to receive what they had been trying to give her. She bowed, slowly, deeply, not because she thought she had to, not because it was expected, but because she wanted to, because gratitude sat heavy in her chest, because she needed to acknowledge what this moment meant. She stayed in that bow for a heartbeat longer than tradition required, not dramatically, just sincerely, letting the warmth of the room wash over her, absorbing it like sunlight, letting it sink into the places inside her that had once been cold, once been afraid. When she rose, she looked toward the audience, not at a single person, but at the room as a whole, like she was seeing the collective presence instead of individual faces, like she understood that somehow this moment belonged to all of them, not just her. She didn't cry, her eyes prickled but no tears fell, not because she wasn't moved, but because the emotion sat too deep, too full, like a well overflowing but not spilling, held delicately in her chest where it could glow without breaking. She listened to the applause, really listened, and realized it had layers, the sharp claps, the gentle ones, the cheers tucked between, the collective breath of a room that had just shared something with her. She had thought applause was just sound, just noise, but now she understood it was communication, a conversation, a message saying, "We heard you, and we felt something, and maybe even thank you. The sound filled spaces inside her she didn't know existed. Like applause could reach places words couldn't. Like appreciation could be a kind of healing. For a moment, she imagined her younger self watching this. The girl who couldn't get a scale right, who stumbled over simple pieces, who felt invisible in classrooms because her voice never made it past her own lips. She imagined that girl standing beside her, eyes wide, mouth open slightly, not in disbelief, but in awe, and she wished she could tell that version of herself, "Look, look what happens when you don't give up." But she didn't need to say it, the music had already said it. The applause was already saying it, the moment itself was already proof. The applause continued, not fading, and she took another breath, deeper this time, like her body finally trusted the air again, trusted herself again. Someone near the stage leaned forward, clasping their hands together, eyes shining like they had been moved by something they didn't expect, something they couldn't name, and she wondered if this moment might stay with them too. Even if only as a feeling. One person in the balcony cupped their hands around their mouth and called out, "Bravo!" Just once, not too loud, not attention-seeking, just sincere, and the word echoed through the room like a ribbon of sound. Wrapping around her, she felt it land in her heart like a seed, something that might grow into confidence, into belief, into a future she once thought was too big for her to hold. She thought of her teacher, wherever they were. She imagined them standing somewhere in the world, not knowing that their words, their patience, their frustration, their guidance, had just bloomed on a stage far away. She thought of her family, of the people who tried their best to understand her dream even when they didn't fully get it, even when they worried it wouldn't lead to anything, even when they didn't know how to support her but loved her anyway. She thought of her classmates, the ones who played louder, learned faster, shined brighter. The ones she compared herself to until she felt small, and she wished she could tell them, there's more than one way to shine. But she didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her music had spoken for her. And now the applause was speaking back. For the first time in her life, she felt like the world didn't just see her. It heard her, and that difference mattered in ways she couldn't describe. She straightened her posture, her back tall, her chin steady, her hands relaxed at her sides, and she allowed herself to take in the moment without shrinking away from it. The applause began to soften, a gradual fade like the end of a song. Not sudden but gentle, respectful. Like the audience knew the power of endings too, knew how to let them settle. But even as the clapping slowed, the energy in the room didn't disappear. It lingered, like the last note of a chord hanging in the air long after the keys had been released. She gave one more small bow, softer than the first, like a thank you wrapped in movement. And this time when she rose, she smiled, not a timid smile, not a nervous one, but a smile rooted in something real, something earned. She turned slightly and stepped away from the piano, not with hesitation, but with a kind of grace she didn't know she possessed. Like each step was guided by the applause that still echoed in her bones. Backstage waited for her, the hallway, the quiet, the space where she would finally let herself feel everything without an audience, without the pressure of eyes, just her and the aftermath of growth. As she walked toward the side of the stage, she heard one more round of applause start up briefly, like the room wasn't ready to let her go yet, like they wanted to hold on to the moment just a little longer. Her footsteps slowed for a second, acknowledging it without turning around, without looking back, because she didn't need to. Not anymore. She knew. She understood. She believed. When she reached the edge of the stage, she paused, just for a heartbeat, not to doubt, but to cherish, to let her eyes sweep over the hall one last time, to memorize it, to carry it with her like a souvenir for her soul. The hall didn't look intimidating now, it didn't look like a test, it looked like a memory she would keep, one she would revisit when she felt lost, when she doubted again, when she needed proof that she could rise. She stepped off stage, and the applause finally faded behind her. But the sound didn't leave her. It stayed, tucked somewhere inside her, ready to whisper to her on days when silence felt too heavy. She didn't know what would come next. Auditions, rejection, success, confusion, joy, failure, opportunity. She didn't know, but she knew she could face it. She knew she could stand. She knew she could try, because the room erupted, yes, but more importantly, She erupted. Something inside her broke open and became something new, something stronger, something that could grow, and she walked forward, not just off stage, but into the next chapter of who she was becoming, carrying with her the sound of hands clapping, hearts listening, and a world that finally heard her. Backstage felt quieter than she expected, like the walls were catching their breath after holding so much sound. The air softer, the lights dimmer. Her footsteps muffled on the carpet as she moved forward slowly. She could still feel the applause under her skin, like a second heartbeat, gentle but persistent. A reminder that something important had just happened. Something she couldn't brush aside even if she tried. For years she had imagined what a moment like this might feel like. She pictured fireworks in her chest or confetti falling from the ceiling or some dramatic shift that would make the world suddenly look different. But now that she was living it, she realized change didn't always arrive like a storm. Sometimes it arrived like a sunrise, quiet but undeniable, lighting up places inside you that had always been dark. She leaned against the wall and placed her hand over her chest, feeling her heartbeat. Steady now, not frantic like before, not trembling, just there, calm and real, like an anchor she hadn't known she was missing. The performance hadn't solved every problem in her life. It didn't erase her doubts forever or guarantee that her future would be easy, but she felt something shift inside her. A tiny gear clicking into place, a door sliding open, a path revealing itself just enough to take the next step. She could hear voices from the stage as another performer prepared to take their place. Life continuing as it always did, the world not stopping because of her moment, and yet, inside her, a part of the world had stopped, paused, changed direction. She closed her eyes and let herself feel it, not to brag, not to feed her ego, but to honor it, to say to herself, this mattered. Even if no one else ever said it, even if it was never recorded, never posted online, never talked about again. Moments like this didn't need an audience to be real. They only needed honesty, and honesty sat in her chest like warm tea, soothing, strong, steady. Someone backstage passed by her, offering a nod and a small smile, the kind that said they had watched, that they had seen something worthwhile, that they recognized a spark, and she returned the smile without forcing it, without hiding it, just simply letting it be. She wasn't used to being seen, not like this, and it felt new, strange, fragile, like a bird landing in open hands. But she didn't close her fists this time. She didn't try to trap it or push it away. She just held the moment gently, letting it rest, letting it breathe. A crew member approached her with a clipboard in hand, congratulating her quietly. Just a few simple words. Nothing grand, nothing poetic, but they carried weight. They felt like proof that what she felt wasn't a dream. She nodded, thanked them softly, her voice still a little shaky. Not from fear anymore, but from emotion she didn't know how to fit into sentences. She walked further backstage, not sure where she was going, not sure if she needed to go anywhere, just needing to move, to let her body catch up to her spirit, to remind herself that she was still here, still real, still grounded. A door on the far side of the hallway led to a small lounge, the kind with a sofa pushed against the wall, a water dispenser humming quietly, and posters from past events pinned in uneven lines like memories someone tried to organize but never quite finished. She sank onto the sofa, not collapsing but settling. Like her body finally released tension it had been holding since the first moment she touched the piano that evening. Her hands rested on her knees, and she looked down at them. The same hands she used to stare at in frustration, wondering why they wouldn't move the way she wanted, why they couldn't produce the sound she heard in her head. Tonight those hands had told a story, not perfectly, not flawlessly, but honestly, and for the first time she didn't see them as weak or clumsy or lacking. She saw them as capable, as growing, as hers. The door opened again, and one of the event organizers stepped inside, offering her a bottle of water and a smile that reached their eyes. The kind of smile people give when they believe in what they've just seen. They didn't say much, just a few calm words, telling her she did well, telling her the audience responded, telling her she should be proud, and each word felt like a puzzle piece clicking into place where doubt used to live. After they left, she sat alone again, the silence gentle, like a blanket instead of a void, and she let her thoughts wander to what might come next. She knew one performance didn't guarantee a future. She knew talent and effort didn't always lead to open doors. She knew rejection could still come, failure could still happen, disappointment could still find her. But she also knew something she didn't know before. She knew she could survive those things. She knew she could stand up again. She knew she had proof now, not from someone else, not from a certificate or a trophy, but from herself, from what she just did. Sometimes a moment doesn't hold power because of the reaction it gets. Sometimes it holds power because of the person it changes, and she felt changed, not into a new person entirely, but into a truer version of herself. Like the performance peeled back a layer of fear and revealed someone she had always wanted to be. Someone she was always meant to be. That realization was the moment that changed everything. Not the applause, not the standing audience, not the cheers. Those things were beautiful. They were gifts she would treasure. But the real change was quieter, deeper. Something that would stay with her long after the sound faded. She stood, feeling taller somehow even though her height was the same. Feeling lighter even though nothing had physically changed. Feeling more rooted even though her feet were just on carpet, not on stage. She stepped back into the hallway, passing the posters again, and this time she didn't feel like she was looking through glass at a world she didn't belong to. She felt like she was allowed to knock on the door, maybe even step inside. In the distance, she could hear faint applause for the next performer, the sound moving like waves through the building, and she smiled, knowing she was part of that world now. Not the center of it, not the star, but a piece of it, a participant, someone who earned her place through effort, through vulnerability, through courage. As she made her way toward the exit, the night air greeted her, cool against her cheeks, grounding her in the present, reminding her the world outside was still turning, still real, still waiting. She paused on the steps just outside the venue, the streetlights painting long shadows on the sidewalk, cars passing occasionally, people chatting in small groups, life happening in ordinary ways. It comforted her, that normalcy, because even though tonight felt extraordinary, she knew she would need ordinary days too, days to practice, days to doubt, days to rest, days to grow. She took out her phone, not to record anything, not to post anything, but to send a simple message to someone who believed in her, someone who once told her just being brave enough to try could change things. She typed slowly, carefully, unsure how to put the night into words, finally writing, "I played tonight, and I think something in me changed." She didn't know if the person would respond right away or later or never. But it didn't matter. She had said it. She had named the moment. She had honored it. As she put her phone away, she realized she wasn't afraid of what came next. Not because she expected everything to go smoothly, but because she trusted herself now, trusted her ability to keep going even when things got messy, even when things hurt, even when she failed. She breathed in the cool night air, letting it fill her lungs, letting it settle her mind, letting it remind her she was alive, and that being alive meant more moments like this could exist, moments waiting to be found, created, earned, lived. The performance was over, but the story wasn't. The applause was over, but the music wasn't. The night was ending, but her beginning was just opening its eyes. She stepped off the final stair and onto the sidewalk, her footsteps steady, her spine straight, her chin lifted, the world in front of her not smaller or larger than before, just clearer. A moment can change everything, yes, but sometimes the change isn't in the world, it's in the person, and she knew now that the world didn't have to shift for her to find her place in it. She just had to shift within herself. So she walked forward, not quickly, not slowly, but with purpose, with intention, with belief, each step a quiet promise to herself. A promise to keep going, a promise to keep playing, a promise to keep choosing courage even when fear sounded louder. The night held her story like a secret, and she held the future like an invitation, open, possible, waiting.